Everybody. I think I say this every webinar that we've had and will have, but we appreciate you guys coming out. It's Thursday at 7 p.m. There's so many things you can be doing with your time, and we appreciate you spending your time with us, taking an hour to learn and to try to improve and to take a skill and try to get better at it. So, well, anyway, so welcome. Thanks for coming out tonight. I'm excited for this webinar. You're very welcome. So, mental performance is such a huge piece of the puzzle when it comes to performance training. This is one of the pillars that T3 has been built on. Everyone knows strength training. One of the missing pieces for probably 90% is going to be nutrition. And then 99% of people is going to be the mental part of it. And that's something we're going to discuss tonight. And Colleen's done a great job with our athletes in-house with all of our teams, with all of our athletes in a one-on-one setting and in a group setting. So again, it's just a piece of the puzzle from a performance training to be your best that I think most people overlook and underutilize. So one thing that we're going to talk about tonight is the visualization part. And Colleen and I were talking about earlier before, hearing visualization, how important it is and how it's utilized in a military setting from the people that we work with, how they would sit, whether it be a float tank or whether it sit in their room before a mission, before an operation, go through everything in their head, go through the contingencies, what can happen, what will happen, how do I put myself in that position, how do I get myself out of that position? That way, when you're going through in real life, you've already kind of been there and done that. Same thing, another story I was talking about earlier, one of the state champion tennis players that we trained, we would go through, when he was in college, go through his matches that he lost and then correct the mistakes that he made. And such an impact did that make on his performance, on his play. And again, it's just an underutilized piece of the puzzle that I don't think a lot of people pay attention to or appreciate. And again, Colleen's been a great addition to T3. We're so thankful to have her on board. The way that she works with our athletes, because she understands both sides of it. She understands this mental performance side, but she's also a strength coach. So she does a lot of time on that side. So she can relate to the athletes on both sides of that coin and how to kind of apply that best for our athletes. She breaks down the information very, very well to bite-sized and digestible chunks. So she's been a fantastic addition. So I'll stop rambling. I'll turn it over to her. But again, thank you very much for taking an hour out of your day to help us.
Yeah, thank you everyone for being here. That was the best introduction I could have asked for, so I appreciate that. But I'm honored to be here with you guys at T3 working with these athletes. I know we have a lot of athletes that are super passionate about what they do, so being able in my position to be a piece of their puzzle and to help them along their journey is more than I could ever ask for. So excited to be here with you guys tonight, to have everybody here and hopefully teach you a thing or two that you can use to get that level up in your performance. But I will go ahead and share my screen here. And we'll get to work. All right, so can you guys see my screen? Are we seeing the PowerPoint here? Are we good with the PowerPoint? All right, awesome. So like Eric said, we're going to talk about visualization for sport performance. And again, he hit the nail on the head. I think it is underutilized a lot. I think a lot of people, when they think of visualization, think about it being kind of like cringy or like cheesy almost. They're like, oh, I don't want to go sit down and like imagine what it would be like for me to do this. But at the end of the day, there's so much proof showing that that's what's actually effective. And that's what can help us get that edge up, that sometimes you got to work through that cringe, work through that awkwardness, and actually put the work in just to get the benefits out of it. So a little overview of what we'll be talking about today. We'll start with a quick intro to visualization, just kind of what it is really briefly. Then we'll go into how visualization works, some studies and some real life examples. Then we'll move into different types of visualization. So hopefully you guys can find one that works for you. And then just some tips and tricks to get started, when to use it, how to use it, all that good stuff. And we'll finish off with some time for questions. So the basics, what is visualization? Basically, it's also known as imagery or mental rehearsal. So all those three can be used interchangeably, and they all mean the same thing. It's referring to that process of creating images associated with a behavior or a skill without physically doing that behavior. So it's when we close our eyes, we can paint that picture, create a scene in our head, and actually perform that skill without actually doing it. So that's visualization in a nutshell, super simplified. But it's also important to note that it's a training tool. It's just like anything we do in the gym, any exercise we do, anything we learn for a sport. It's a tool, it's a skill that requires practice and effort. So you're not just going to sit down one day, try and close your eyes, see your performance, and everything's going to click and you're going to go out and kill it. It's something that's going to take time. It's going to take practice and intentionality to get good at, to actually see the benefits that we want to see out of it. And then just again, some basics, it can be useful for rehearsing strategies, learning specific skills or movements, for response anticipation. So reading plays, figuring out how you might handle things, and managing emotions. So how does it work? We're not going to dive super deep into the actual neuroscience nitty-gritty of this. But the cool thing about visualization is it works in our brain with a process called neuroplasticity. So this is basically how we learn things and how our brain stores and creates new information. So when we're visualizing, even though we're not actually physically carrying out an action or a performance, our brain kind of thinks that it is in a way. So it's actually activating and strengthening the neural pathways that are associated with that performance as if we were actually doing it. So we're building those neural circuits in our brain through imagery, again, without having to do anything. So if they're already there, then they're built, that's great. We can strengthen them and make them something that is more recognizable to us, more familiar to us. Another really cool thing about visualization is that studies have actually found that there's a potential that it causes low-level activation in our muscles and in our body. So say I'm in the weight room and I'm visualizing myself performing a squat. I know what it feels like. I can go through the process. I can go through my mechanics. This is what it would feel like, but I'm not actually doing it. I'm just visualizing it. There's been studies that have found like actual activation in our muscle fibers associated with that movement. So kind of helping to build that mind-muscle connection, that awareness, and again, just making it more familiar, like muscle memory pretty much. And then on a simple level too, it can help us to prime the brain to carry out specific movements. So this helps if we're using it like before a performance or immediately before we do a skill. If we visualize ourselves doing it first, our brain is already kind of thinking about what we need to do. So when it comes down to actually do it, it's kind of at the forefront of our brain. We're already familiar with it. We're already kind of ready to get to work because those circuits are firing in the way that we want them to. It's not like we were just doing something completely different and then trying to perform to our best. We're already kind of in that mindset, in that right space that we want to be in to perform that action.
Colleen, too, there was a, speaking of that, there was a
Yeah.
great, I think it was the Super Bowl actually, but it was I think it was a Chiefs defensive lineman. You could see him, it was before the game during warmups. He was sitting in the end zone. I think he was leaning against the goalpost. You know, he's got his headphones on, but you could see he has eyes closed. He's going through his handwork and going through all of his hand movements and stuff like that. And you could just see him in the background, literally putting himself in those positions and walking through in his head. And you knew that he was like getting ready to be in situations and visualizing. So like exactly to your point, it just helps him get into that zone and be in that before he's actually in that.
Yeah, he was dialed in. We see that with hockey players too. Sometimes they'll sit on the bench and they'll hold their stick in their hands. I think I have a picture in it here later, and just like really putting yourself in that space. So like you're ready to go when you have to go, right? Awesome. So how does it help? Thinking about visualization, it's important to think about like how much of our daily lives, how much of everything that we learn, we perceive comes through our vision and what we see. And so it's estimated that like 85% of perception, cognition, and learning is all mediated through vision. So when we're thinking about that in relation to visualization, that's exactly what we need, right? If 85% of our learning is already coming from that, then why not spend more time visualizing what we want to learn and kind of helping ourselves along the way? So another way that it can help us too, is when we're visualizing ourselves achieving our goals, performing effectively, maybe even coping with tough situations, it allows ourselves to see positive images of success. So seeing ourselves succeeding, doing what we want to do, carrying out that skill, and that's where the increases in confidence is going to come in. That's where our anxiety is going to get lessened. We're going to have more control of our emotions because we're going to know what to expect. Our brain can be like, oh, I've been there before. This is familiar to me. I know how to handle it, or I know I can do it, and you're going to feel more confident. Um, so again, that goes right into the preparing for competition. It's having those familiar images that we can kind of draw back into when we need them. And then of course it can also help with that mind muscle connection like we talked about, and it can help to aid in injury recovery, which is a really interesting area of visualization that I think a lot of people don't really know about. But we'll talk about it a little more as we go on as well. So does it really work? Like I said at the beginning, I know a lot of people kind of think it's a little cheesy, a little cringy. They might not be super into it, but there's a huge body of research supporting the effects of visualization and the usefulness of it. So like I said, there's tons and tons of studies. I just picked a couple good ones today that are kind of relevant to what we're talking about and to what you guys might be interested in. But we had one study where they had three groups. They had one group that just completed physical training, one group that just did mental training, so they weren't in the gym, just mental training, and one doing a combination of both, so physical and mental training. And I believe they were in the weight room doing squats or a super simple exercise. But at the end of the study, they found that the group that had the combination of mental training and the physical training, they had significantly greater results than any of the other groups. So when we're combining these two things, it's going to give us that edge up that we can't get from doing either one alone. Another study, they were looking at soccer players. They had two groups, and they found that the group that practiced visualization had significantly less competition anxiety when it came to actually performing and actually competing, because again, they could draw back into those images that they had created in their mind when they got to competition. And they're like, hey, I know what to expect. I know what to handle. Like, I know how to handle this. And they were significantly less anxious in that competition space. And then again, we've seen increases in speed, agility, and reaction time with visualization training. And going back to that injury area as well, there was a study on, I believe it was football players that had ACL injuries. And they had a group that practiced visualization throughout the recovery and a group that didn't. And the one that practiced the visualization had significantly less re-injury anxiety. So when it came time for them to actually return and get back into their sport, they felt more confident and they were less worried about getting re-injured because again, they had practiced it, they had put the time in, and they just felt better getting ready to return there. So that's the scientific stuff. Obviously, not everybody is going to be open and super receptive to that, or buy into that stuff. So we do have some real life examples. I think if you talk to any professional athlete, any elite athlete, or read stories about them, majority of them, I'd say, probably if not all of them, are going to mention visualization at some point in their journey. They've probably used it as a tool along the way. It might be part of their non-negotiable pregame routine. It might be something that they're dialed into and they do every day. But there's been interviews with Michael Phelps, LeBron James, Tiger Woods, Lindsey Vonn. All of these athletes have attributed their success and some of their performances to visualization in a way. So it's really cool to look at how it's given these athletes the edge up. And if they didn't realize it until later in their sport, then if we can get athletes that are a little bit younger or at different stages along their way and start implementing it now, you guys are going to have a huge leg up when you get to that point. So like I said, here's this hockey player here. He's sitting on the bench with his stick in hand. He actually kind of goes through the motions of stick handling, making the pass, and he's just dialed in. So you'll see that a lot. You don't just have to sit there with your eyes closed doing nothing. You can actually pretend like you're out there or kind of go through those motions as well.
I like I'll interrupt you one more
Yeah,
time too.
yeah, go ahead.
I like that you put the question in there, like, does it really work? Like, like yes, like we have great examples that you just gave here. We have examples from a high school tennis player to military special operations to, the NFL, players. The I actually saw that. Was that Lindsey Vonn? Is that
Yeah,
who that skier was? Yeah, I saw
yeah,
the interview with her. And
yeah.
she was talking about going through the route in her head. So she would go through, again, eyes closed, go through literally everything, turn, but also, I'm sure you're going to get into this too, but the feel of it, how her
Mhm.
body felt, how her skis feel when she's going around the curve, how the snow feels, the vibrations, literally going into so much detail to build that in her mind that she's already gone through it. And just like anything else, if you've done a squat 1,000 times, you don't have to think about it. You just go. Again, if you score a goal, if you win 1,000 times in your mind, it's basically the same thing. You just went over the science that says your body doesn't know. So it helps so much. So I love that you put that in there because like there's so many examples from junior high to high school to college to pro to whatever it is that to just going through in your daily life, being a doctor, being a first responder, being whatever, going through that in your mind helps so much. It's fantastic.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, we're actually all going to try it together now. So we're going to work on painting that picture. Like you said, feeling your skis under you, feeling your body movements. We want to really include all of our senses in the visualization, in the pictures that we're creating. So we have a super simple one that we're going to try today. It's called lemon imagery. It's nice for groups like this because it's not sport specific. It's something that anybody can do. Because hopefully everybody knows what a lemon looks like. But yeah, so we'll jump into it. So if y'all wouldn't mind getting comfortable where you're at and closing your eyes, we'll start with just taking a few nice deep breaths and focusing on our breathing. If there's any other thoughts coming into your head, just acknowledge them and let them drift away. Take a couple more nice deep breaths. Now I want you to imagine that you're standing in your kitchen. Look around you and see what you see. What color are the walls? Are there windows? Where is the fridge or the oven? What color are the countertops? Do you hear any noises? Maybe the dishwasher's running. Maybe you just finished cooking your favorite meal. Can you smell it? Now I want you to look down at the counter in front of you and imagine that on the counter, there's a cutting board. And next to that cutting board, there's a good sharp knife. Notice what you notice. Now looking at that cutting board, I want you to imagine that sitting on it is a plump, fresh, juicy, bright yellow lemon. In your mind, I want you to picture yourself holding the lemon in one hand. Feel its weight and feel its textures. Feel every bump and ridge in the cold skin of the lemon. Now place it back down on the board and pick up the knife. Take the knife and cut the lemon in half. Feel the resistance to the knife and how it gives way as the lemon splits. Notice the pale yellow pulp of the lemon and the whiteness of the inner peel. Notice if there are any seeds inside the lemon. Now carefully take one of the halves and cut it into two. Notice where a drop or two of juice has come on the surface of the lemon. Feel it on your fingertips running into your hands. Now I want you to hold that wedge and bring it up to your mouth. Smell the fresh, sharp scent of the sour lemon and take a nice big bite into the sour, juicy pulp. All right, you can open your eyes. All right, so that's just a fun activity. It can be really fun in person when you can see people's reactions too. A lot of the people, you can tell as they get to holding that lemon to their mouth and taking a big bite, you can see their faces kind of start to twist or their mouths start to turn as they can like picture themselves taking that big sour bite of the lemon. So I don't know if any of you kind of experienced that. Maybe your mouth started salivating a little bit as you pictured yourself taking that bite. But with that, we just like to see kind of like that mind-body connection. We were just imagining ourselves taking a nice bite of this, but our mouths might have started to salivate, or like we could feel that feeling of the sourness kind of in our mouths. So that's just something to kind of get you thinking about visualization and the power that it can have and the pictures that we can paint using everything in our surroundings. Eric, did you feel the sourness?
I did. I did. Actually, my mouth started watering, but I like when you were talking about cutting into the lemon. I know exactly how it feels like getting through the peel and it's got like kind
Yeah,
of tough, but then slides through. That one
yeah,
got me.
good, good stuff. All right, so now that we tried it, we're just gonna go over some different types of visualization really quick. There's a bunch of different types, but relating to sport, we're gonna go through 6 of the basic ones. So we have skill mastery, skill general, motivational specific, motivational general, relaxation, and for injury recovery. So when we're looking at skill mastery, this is also known as cognitive specific in the scientific terms. But basically it's just focused on a really specific movement or task. So it could be throwing a ball, maybe you're a pitcher and it's pitching the ball, or going through your gymnastics routine, making a play, or performing a power clean in the gym. It's a very specific task or skill that we're used to performing, or that we're trying to learn. So these again are more short sessions of visualization and extra detailed. So we want to go through the whole process step by step. Maybe it's our routine that we have before it. So maybe you have a routine that you do before every pitch. You can go through that routine and then the mechanics of you actually performing that movement. So this type of visualization can be helpful immediately before a performance. So again, maybe we're trying to do a power clean in the gym. We can take a step back for a minute, close our eyes, picture ourselves completing the lift successfully, and then open our eyes, get after it, and bang that rep out. So this also, again, it helps to activate and strengthen those neural pathways that are associated with the skill because it's building those connections in our mind. We're thinking about it just as like we were physically doing it. So continuing to build those pathways, and by doing that, then of course, improving confidence, learning, and anxiety. So the next thing we have is skill general or cognitive general. And this is a little bit more broad. So this is when we're focusing on strategy, situations, or tactics. So it could be visualizing plays, opponents, or the execution of a certain strategy that we might want to implement. So I know football players, a lot of the time they get their playbook, they'll go out, they'll do walkthroughs of their play, they'll go over the plays where everybody needs to be. So this is something that you can do at home, maybe after that, close your eyes and picture yourself walking through those plays. Maybe you're going through the play and you can picture your opponent across from you reacting or making a move and how you're going to react to that. So it's a little more broad and we can get kind of a little crazier with it. But we can be really creative in what we do with that. Another thing that's important to note with this though is that we want to make sure we're including both the good plays and ourselves recovering from the bad plays or making a mistake or dealing with pressure because as athletes we know obviously nothing's going to go perfectly in a game. We can't visualize perfection because that's not what we're going to experience. So if we're sitting there and we're constantly like visualizing ourselves with everything going perfectly and we get to a game and something happens and it's not the way we pictured it, it's not perfect, then we might start to panic a little bit. But if we can put the time in off the field when we're actually visualizing things going wrong and ourselves successfully dealing with that and coming back from it, then when it happens in a game, we're going to feel prepared. We're going to have those images that we can draw back from, knowing that like, hey, I prepped for this. I know how to deal with it. I'm good to do this. And if you're stuck and like trying to come up with different things to visualize as well, you can start with just watching footage. If you have game film, if you have highlight reels, whatever it is, you can watch yourself do it to get an idea of what it might look like or what it feels like. And then you can try and play that back in your brain as well. So next up, we have motivational specific. This is, I think, what people think of a lot of the time when they're thinking about visualization. It's the more like goal-oriented behavior. It's something a little bit more long-term, something that we're working towards. So maybe it could be like winning a championship or making an Olympic team. It's the goal-oriented thing that's like not a dream, but something that we're working towards that we're not currently doing. And this type of visualization can help with motivation and drive. It can help us feel more amped up, more excited, more motivated to keep working. And it creates those feelings of anticipation and self-belief. So I think this is one that we hear a lot about with athletes, professional athletes after a big competition. So maybe it's after the Super Bowl or the World Series, athletes will get interviewed and they're like, how did you prepare for this? Right? The interviews will ask them like, how did you prepare? How did you know you were ready? And the athletes will say like, oh, like we knew we were going to be here. Like we pictured ourselves here. So the athletes put those times in to pretend that they were actually in that situation, to visualize themselves on that field in that game, to visualize all the fans around them, what that situation was going to be like. So that way, when they actually stepped into it, they were prepared for it. They knew what to expect. They knew how to cope with it. It wasn't just like the shock of like, oh my God, what am I going to do? How am I going to deal with it? They had drawn that mental picture, so they were ready to handle it when the time came. So next up, we have motivational specific. This can help cope with challenging situations. So something that is maybe a high pressure situation, something that we're struggling with, or a challenge that we want to overcome. So it could be maybe a high pressure penalty shot, or maybe it's getting ready for a situation where you might be the last out in the ninth inning of a baseball game, a super high pressure situation, and how we're going to deal with that when the time comes. So in these situations, we want to focus on our feelings and our emotions, and we want to be able to feel the nerves and the jitters of that situation. We want to include all those feelings, all those uncomfortable feelings that might actually come up in that situation, and then be able to flip it and replace it with what we'd ideally like to feel. So feeling confident, feeling empowered, feeling strong. You want to be able to see your body language and imagine yourself performing and seeing that success in those situations as well. And a cool thing that we can do with this too is we can visualize the things that might set us off. So say you're an athlete, maybe you struggle when your coach gives you feedback. You know that's something that like you can't deal with. You get really mad, you get really frustrated when that happens. You can spend time visualizing yourself getting that feedback and then coping with it in a way that's more productive than what you're currently doing. So that way, again, when that time comes, we can draw back into, oh, I know how I want to cope with this. I've imagined it. I can implement that in real time now. So getting a little away from the skill and situation specific, we can also just use relaxation imagery. This can be kind of nice for athletes that might struggle with overthinking or getting too hyped up before games. Maybe it's just you need some help sleeping, you have trouble winding down at night and being able to relax. We can just paint a picture of a place that you feel relaxed, you feel calm, you feel happy. So when we think of visualization, I think we think of it has to be like sport getting better, really dialed in a certain skill, but we can also take time away from that. Maybe before a game, you don't need to be dialed in, focused on what you're doing. Maybe you need to step back and be able to relax and feel kind of calm, and that's where this would come in. So this again is just focused on being relaxed, focusing on our breathing, and just releasing any tension that we might be holding on to. So then the last one we have here, I think this one's the most interesting, but we have injury recovery visualization. So this can increase feelings of control in our injury and recovery journey. It can add variety into rehabilitation, so away from the monotony of just going to PT, going to therapy, whatever it is, we can add this in to add some newness into it. And then it can potentially enhance the rate of healing, which again, I think is pretty cool. Um, we can use it to decrease re-injury anxiety, like that study that I mentioned at the beginning, and just kind of feel more prepared when it's that time to return. But there was actually a really interesting study that was done on cancer patients who used imagery in their treatment journey. And the study found that those that practiced imagery reported increased coping with their diagnosis, improved mood, improved quality of life, an increased sense of internal control of their situation, improved immune responses, decreased post-op pain and anxiety, and a decreased amount of pain meds actually used post-operation too. So pretty powerful stuff, just by the power of imagery in their situation, a situation that I can't really imagine going through. But if we have that tool that can make it better for them, then why not use it, right? So when we look at injury visualization, there's a couple different types that we can use. The first one is healing imagery. So that's when we're actually like imagining our body healing itself. So it can be kind of tricky. It can kind of have to involve like some physiological knowledge. So a little bit of understanding of anatomy of the human body works, or you can be more abstract with it and get creative and come up with what you think it might look like. So in this type of imagery, you would imagine maybe your tight muscles being massaged. You can picture your broken bones healing and coming back together. Maybe see muscle fibers either separating and releasing or repairing themselves. You can concentrate on feelings of warmth and relaxation, or even just imagine the pain flowing out of your body. So you can get kind of creative with it. I know it's a little bit different, but it has been shown to work. Um, and then when it comes to the re-injury anxiety, we can just again imagine ourselves returning from our sport, playing the way that we can, being injury free, being pain free, and performing the task where we got injured. So yeah, that's a really interesting take on visualization that I think a lot of people don't really know about, but again, another tool for us to use if the time comes.
And I don't want to, I don't know if you're getting into this later, or I don't want to jump ahead too much,
No,
but
you're good.
as we were talking, a couple things would it make sense at all to utilize multiple of those? Like, we're going through, skill mastery and skill general. So you're going through, you're visualizing yourself, whether you're an adult, you're visualizing yourself 5 years from now, and what are the decisions I would make or to get me to that point. If you're an athlete, you're going through the game before and going through your steps and going through your mistakes. And then is it possible, or does it make sense at all to move forward once you do that, go into the relaxation kind of thing? Like, can you lump those together, or does that?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the good thing about it is that you can make it what you want to make it, right? You're in control of what you're seeing and what's most beneficial for you. So if you want to start more simple and really dial in on a specific skill, and then once you have that, once you've painted that picture and you feel good with that, you can move into something more broad or that relaxation, then for sure, go for it. It's whatever you think would benefit you the most, but I don't think there would be any harm in combining them at all. So
So like just combining and then using those skills to go through your visualization, do what you need to do. And then once you've gone through that in your head, the whole routine is maybe 10 more minutes, and that's your relaxation time before to calm down, to focus, to
yeah,
get into. Okay. Okay, cool.
yeah, for sure. For sure. That could be really helpful too, even if you're an athlete that maybe uses it like before bed or at a different time when you need to be in a relaxed state, definitely combine them and make sure we're not getting ourselves hyped up, picturing ourselves performing this skill and then not being able to shut it off. If we need that extra step to help us relax or help us kind of tone down,
Yeah.
definitely add it in there too.
Like before a test or something too. If you're,
Mhm.
going into finals, you can relax a little bit, you can concentrate, you can focus. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so now that we've kind of gone over all the nitty-gritty with it, how do we get started? So an important thing to think of is when to use it, like we kind of just touched on. So again, it really depends on the person and when you think it might be most helpful for you, or the type of imagery that you're using. So we can use it as part of our pregame or pre-practice routine. So maybe mom or dad drives you to the field or to the gym, whatever it is. Maybe while they're driving you, you're sitting in the back practicing your visualization. Maybe it's on the bus on the way to a game. You have your headphones in, you're nice and relaxed. You're visualizing what you need to see. Or maybe you're sitting in the dugout, you're actually on the field, being where you are, seeing it in person, and really preparing to be ready. You can kind of play around with it there, but having it as part of your routine, that's a non-negotiable. So you can do it every time you need to perform and know that it's part of your routine that's going to get you ready. Again, like I said, you can use it maybe before bed, whether it's every night or the night before a competition. Maybe that's a situation when you use that skill, like the general imagery, and you know maybe a team you're playing against is really good at this one play, or there's something that they do specifically, you can imagine yourself reacting to the plays that they're going to run or like anticipating what they're going to do. So then again, when the time comes the next day, you play against them, you're like, hey, I knew this was coming. I knew what to expect. I practiced this. I got it. And then again, more simply, we can do it right before we complete an exercise or during treatment if we're looking at that imagery recovery. Maybe we're in the athletic training room getting ice, getting heat, instead of just sitting there scrolling on our phone. Maybe we're using that time to relax, to visualize, and be a little bit more productive with it. So how do we structure it? It's really similar to that lemon imagery that we went through. We want to make sure that we're starting with getting comfortable, finding somewhere that's quiet, where we can focus, that's maybe distraction free if possible. And then we want to get into that relaxed state. So we want to focus on our breathing, get nice and comfortable, get nice and relaxed. After that, while we start to paint our picture, we want to make sure that we're including all of our senses. So what you see, what you hear, what you smell, are you touching anything? Maybe you're holding a baseball if you're getting ready for baseball. Maybe you're holding your stick or a football, whatever it is, you can actually physically touch that thing too. That's going to help you get that frame of mind going. And then you want to focus on your emotions as well. So bringing in any emotions related to that situation is just going to help us feel even more immersed in that picture that we're trying to create. So after we do all that, we want to decide on our perspective. So are you looking, when you're visualizing, are you taking an internal or an external perspective? So an internal perspective would be like you're actually going through that motion. So it's like you're actually doing it, you're seeing it out of your eyes, you're the one completing this. Or we can take a third person perspective, which would be like a bird's eye view, like you're watching yourself do it from the outside. So that's a little bit trickier. A lot of athletes aren't as fond of that one because it can be kind of hard. It's not like we're actually doing it ourselves. It's hard to kind of know what we're looking like or what we're doing. But it's something that can be useful if you're able to visualize that better than our other method. And then we want to make sure we have a plan. So know what you want to visualize before you go into your session. Because if you go in and you're just like, I don't know, I'm just going to visualize myself on the field or on the ice, whatever it is, you're probably not going to be very productive. You're probably not going to get much out of it because you're going to have to be coming up with it on the fly. And it just might not be as intentional as it could be if you had a plan. So then again, throughout, focus on your breathing, staying relaxed, and just remember that you're in control. You can see what you want to see. If it's not going well, open your eyes and start over. Take a break, slow it down, whatever you need to do. You're the one that's in control of it. So there's a couple different models that we can look at when we're creating an imagery script or an imagery session for ourselves. One of, I think, the simplest and most common ones is called the PETLEP model. And that's just basically an acronym to help us remember what we need to include. So again, like I said before, it's starting with something physical, getting comfortable and relaxed, and then painting the picture of the environment, choosing a specific task, thinking about timing. Are we looking at things in real time? Maybe we're slowing it down, looking at things in slow motion. Maybe it's a combination of the two. So maybe I'm a baseball player. I'm picturing myself getting ready to go up to bat. I'm in the batter or I'm in the on deck circle, going through my routine, walking into the box, going through my pre-bat routine, and then seeing the pitcher all in real time. And then once that pitcher releases the ball, maybe I'm seeing that ball in slow motion, right? I'm seeing the seam, seeing how it spins, watching it come in, and then watching myself hit it out. So again, we're in control of that, and you can change it as you want. You can change it to whatever you think might help you the most. So after we think about timing, we're going to think about learning. So changing our imagery over time as we're learning skills, as we're getting better to match up with where we're at. And then finally, we have emotions. So again, including our emotions and then thinking about that perspective too. So this is really just a nice acronym to help us try and remember what to include when we're actually getting down to it and trying to go through an imagery session. So some tips and tricks. Again, like I mentioned earlier, we want to make sure that we're visualizing success and not perfection. Because when we get stuck in that perfection, and creating those expectations, it's not going to prepare us as well for real life situations when things don't go perfectly. So again, creating those real life expectations and making sure we're visualizing things close to our actual skill or ability level, so that way we can create those circuits and we can expect the same results when we actually perform it physically compared to what we visualize. We want it to kind of match up and be something that's comparative. So remember, practice makes perfect too, just like any skill that we're learning in the gym. It's something that's going to get better over time. If you're ready to start trying to include visualization, it might not be great at first. You might get frustrated. You might not be able to see things as clearly. Just try and stick to it, get through that awkwardness or the cheesiness, whatever it is that you might feel. Keep practicing and you'll get better with time, I promise. And then focus on quality, not quantity. I don't expect you to go tonight after this and spend 30 minutes trying to visualize an entire period of a hockey game. Start with a minute, start with 2 minutes, and just try and be really detailed, create those really impactful images. And once you're able to do that at a really detailed level, then work on increasing time, going for those longer scenarios, going for those longer sessions. A couple more tips and tricks. Make sure we're beginning with breathing and a relaxation focus. I don't want to just come from the gym, sit down and try and start to visualize while I'm huffing and puffing, thinking about the lift that I just did, whatever it is. Take a couple breaths, start with that, really try and wind down, be present with where we're at, and then get into it. We want to make sure we're detailed and we're bringing in that emotion. Take your time, include all your senses. How do you typically feel? How do you want to feel in these situations? And then if you're struggling to get started on your own too, you can just look for guided imagery videos online. I know YouTube has a bunch. You can look up sport-specific ones, position-specific ones, and kind of start there and see what they might sound like for you specifically. Or reach out and we can create one together. We can create a recording or something that might help you not try and kind of create it on your own. And then finally, like I've kind of said a couple times, just remember you're in control. If you need to stop and start over, go for it. If things aren't going well, it's okay. Rewind, hit the rewind button and get done what you need to get done, but you're the one that's in control of it. So it's up to you. But yeah, those are some tips and tricks to get started. And I hope that they're helpful for you guys and you feel a little bit better about getting started, maybe a little less awkward, a little less cheesy with it now that you know that actually does work and can be helpful for you. But yeah, if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
No, I think that was great. I think I have like a full page of notes. I was trying to trying to remember everything going back through. I think that was fantastic. Again, I think the biggest thing that you were talking about too was like intent, right? We talk about, when you practice or lift or go through the sport, oh, real quick too, before I get into my comment, if anyone has any comments, feel free to throw them in the chat box or, just shout them out, whatever you want to do. The chat box might be easier. I can kind of read them off as they come in, but if you guys have any questions, please feel free to throw them in there. But one of the things that we always talk about and coaches talk about is intent. What's the difference between doing a drill and doing a drill to get better is having intent. And it's the same thing here. When we go through these visualizations and we go through these things in our mind first, when we're in that game or in that competition, you have that more intent, right? You have that feeling that I've been here before and I can do this because I've already kind of gone through it in my head. And same thing, building these pre-game routines or pre-competition routines just reinforces that intent of what I'm here to do and what I'm supposed to do. So that's fantastic. That's awesome. But yeah, again, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat box and I'll read them out. Hold on one second while we have one. So I got one question coming in. Oh, nice. Okay. So yeah, she said, Jennifer, yes, thank you so much. So 9-year-old son's 9U team had a mindfulness coach last year that would take the boys into the outfield before games, have them all lay down, guide them through breathing and visualization, and how much it benefited her coach. So again, we're talking about professional Olympic athletes down to a 9U coach. So again, it's not just for elite athletes or people who are into this stuff. It happens for everybody. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I love that. We did the same thing. I was lucky enough to go down with the Ball State softball team to the MAC championships when I was there. They were in Miami, Ohio, I think last year, and we did the same thing. We were out on the field night before that first game, visualizing what it was going to feel like, what it was going to look like, and prepping. And I think it was really helpful for some of those girls. So I'm glad that they're starting it at the 9U level.
And one question I did have too is there a bad time to utilize visualization or go through these kind of routines? Is there something that we should stay away from or?
Yeah, so that really depends on the person, honestly. So if you're the type of person that like maybe before a game you're already feeling really worked up or you're already kind of overthinking about things, and then you're trying to include visualization and then you're getting stressed out or you're just like thinking too much to a point where it's not helping you, then maybe don't use it before a game. Use it the night before. Or if you're trying to go through visualization and you're struggling to see yourself succeeding, maybe you're seeing yourself making mistakes, which can happen, right? We're not going to pretend like that doesn't happen. You're seeing yourself make errors, make mistakes, or not succeed. Then we want to take a break. We want to stop that and try and regroup another time because then when we actually get to the competition, that's going to be the image that we have in our head. So we want to make sure that we're being able to see like our actual success in that moment. And if we're not, then take a break from it, regroup, and try again, maybe try something different, maybe at a different time. And just think about if it's helping you or hurting you in that situation.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And then what are some of the roadblocks that you've seen with people maybe getting started or going through? Is that kind of the same thing that you just answered? Like, if it's causing a little too much anxiety, or what kind of roadblocks do you see when you go through this with people?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is really just like not buying into it. It's something that you really have to do, like be intentional with, like we talked about, and like want to do it. Because if you're going in and you're like, oh, like not really trying to see these pictures and not putting in that effort, then it's not going to work, right? You're not going to create those images that we need to see to get those results. But if we can buy into it, then that's going to help us kind of get past that roadblock, create those vivid pictures, create those reactions in the brain, in the mind, and all that good stuff. So yeah, just making sure that we're buying into it is a huge thing I think that some people struggle with.
That's good. I mean, same thing going through with intent. That's why you go through practice with intent. If you just go through practice and go through the motions, you're not getting anything out of it.
Yeah.
And you touched on this a little bit too. To get started, you said the easiest way or the best first step is going through a minute at a time, right? And
Yeah.
just kind of doing it for a minute and then gradually building up. You don't have to do it for 30 minutes, right? That's the best way to kind of get started.
Yeah, I think short and more frequent is more impactful than 30 minutes once a month or whatever it is. If we can just get in the habit of consistently, maybe 1 minute before bed every night, I'm visualizing myself doing this one specific skill, and we can get more vivid, more detailed, and more clear with that over time. Once we can really see that and feel that and create that picture that we want to see, then we can start kind of increasing time. Or maybe 1 minute's enough. Maybe you can see that skill that you need to see in a minute and you're good. Like it depends on what you're trying to see and how detailed you need to be. But there's nothing wrong with it being short and sweet and to the point.
That's cool. No, that's awesome. Again, I appreciate you taking your time out to do
Yeah.
this kind of stuff with us and for us and with our athletes and with your teams. And again, we've seen it work time over time over time. And it's fantastic to get a breakdown of this and see actually the steps that go into it and the whys behind it. So that's fantastic. And two, if you have any questions, you got a couple more minutes to throw them in there. Also, too, we'll send this recording out if you pre-registered, which you obviously already did because you're here. We'll send this video out so you can review this. You can go back over. But additionally, if you have questions, I always think of stuff I should have said, 5 minutes after the thing ends or a day after. When you guys
Yeah.
think of those questions, feel free to reach out. We're more than happy to answer those questions, or you can talk to Colleen, in person too, and do that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, definitely. I had a slide with my contact info on it and I stopped sharing my screen first, but I'll send my number in the chat if anybody has questions and wants to reach out or maybe set up a meeting or anything in the future. Feel free to reach out. And I'd be happy to meet with anybody.
that's awesome. No, again, thank you guys very much. I say this all the time, but I appreciate everyone coming out and really wanting to better themselves. And intent seems to be the theme tonight. So thank you for having intent in what we do and an intent in getting better and betting yourselves, betting your kids. So yeah, I appreciate everybody. Thank you very much. Again, we'll follow up with a video and Colleen's always here for if you have any more questions later on. So
Yeah, thank you everyone for coming. Hope you
cool.
learned.
Have a good night. Thank you guys very much. Bye. Thank you.